There is so much we need to unpack, but if we get straight into it, how have you felt about your portrayal on the show?
There's there's a lot to go into. Like I'm pretty embarrassed to even to be on the show, to be honest, and what's actually how they've actually made my character look on the show. I've definitely watched it back, and it's been a really tough watch in the fact that there's been a number of times where they're showing that, or not showing my conversation, not showing the decisions that I make, not showing my contribution to the relationship, which makes me look like I don't have a voice. It makes it look like that I'm so far into Lauren and wanting to make it work. And yeah, early on in the relationship, definitely. I came into the experiment to try and make it work with anyone that I met. And definitely did everything I could with Lauren to make that relationship work. And then literally throughout the last week, we were on the same page. There was no spark. It was basically, okay, we need to exit this experiment. We need to spend the last week sort of hanging out as friends, and we're on the same pages with that. So it's a very hard watch in the fact that they've taken out a lot of the context. I've done a couple of Instagram reels recently, and people are like, "Oh, how come we haven't seen this personality from him on the show? How come we haven't seen the humor?" Well, it was all there in the time, but there's a lot of content they obviously video and record, and then they show what they want to show. So it's disappointing to see that production and the edit producers, and we all know it, we sign up, we know what we expect. They make what they want, but it is a shame to watch it back and go, they remove personality, they remove the humor, they take it all into a narrative that they want to feed the audience.
I think a big part of last week mentioned it was shown that Lauren wasn't as into you as you were into her and all of
Mm.
that. Then with the boys' night, they almost tried to help you see the light or kind of get you a different
Mm.
perspective. How was that from your perspective then? Obviously, if you have checked out with Lauren and you had agreed to leave, were they
Mm.
really pushing the angle for you to stay or what happened there?
Yeah, I woke up first morning at couples retreat and wanted to leave. I was definitely done. I was also unwell. I'd got some sort of virus and I was really unwell, had no energy and headache and all the rest. So I didn't want to be there, as well as Lauren and I both knew where we were. I knew it wasn't going to work in this experiment with her and I. So this whole narrative that gets getting pushed, and even last night watching the commitment ceremony, everyone in the group and even Ryan sort of stating, "Come on, Clint, you can tell us that you're into it." And I'm like, why can't you hear that we're on the same level here? We're just friends. And I remember at the time, Alessandra got really aggressive on the couch, really pushing this agenda, saying, "This does not make sense, Clint. Like last week, you were saying that you had feelings for Lauren." I'm like, "Yeah, that's true. And it's also true now that I don't." So they kept really pushing this agenda that and forcing me to, or trying to get me to say that I'm into her. And it was it was really time to leave, and I just did not enjoy being forced or having that pressure and them not listening. And that's the huge problem with this show. Unless you stand up and you yell and you're very loud and you override other people's voice, you don't get heard. And that's a huge part of why I wanted to leave. I didn't want to stay in this environment where when you have a conversation with someone, that someone else talks over the top, they drown you out, and they don't listen. And multiple times I got sick of saying to the group, "Can you actually ask me how I feel, not tell me what you think I feel?"
So Dave, kind of going up to your box. What was his intention there, do you think? Like, was it actually to help you? Was it to get extra airtime? Like, if you're saying he wasn't really listening to what your thoughts were, I'd love to know what happened there.
I was surprised in my Voxy after the boys' night where Dave literally ran out of the bushes and came up and wanted to tell me something once the minute the cameras were rolling. And it's like, you've had plenty of time to tell me this. So I was confused with not necessarily blaming Dave, like he was the one that did it, but was it production getting him to do that at that time to fall into this narrative and create this, "You've got to tell Clint this." And it's like, I literally stood there going, yeah, like I know this. And it's like 1 in the morning at this stage. And I didn't even want to talk about the relationship. And finally I said, because we went back to our room and they convinced me to go and do a Voxy and talk about the relationship. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And I walked out on my bare feet and just did it. And then literally he pounced out of the bushes and came and said it. So I'm like, really? Like, I didn't even want to do this. It's been a couple of hours since this all wound down. So that completely felt like a setup for sure to feed into this whole narrative.
You and Lauren were very much on the outs with the rest of the group. Did you have any close friends or close connections, or was it really you versus them?
Well, on camera, it was completely us versus them. Off camera, the guy, like even guys like Dave, would come up and give me a hug and go, "It's all good, bro. Like it's all part of what we do here." And same with Adrian. Like Adrian and I go head to head with name calling and all the very immature stuff, and then we literally walk inside after that campfire setting, and he's like, "Oh, good, bro. Like this is what happens." And so it was very hard to work out what was actually going on because I'm like, 5 minutes ago, you're standing up yelling at me. And now we're inside. It's like we're pouring a drink and having a good time. So that's very confusing. And it was the same thing at dinner parties. I saw it with other people. I literally saw, Dave going at Adrian and then he'd walk off and that high five. Or Dave having a go at Ryan and then they'd walk behind the cameras and hug each other. And so it was so difficult to then go, what am I doing here? Like, who do you trust? This is so put together. And there are some good people. So off camera, yeah, guys like Dave, I think he is a good guy and we've had good chats. I definitely think he brought a lot of things forward at dinner parties and times where the cameras were rolling, which is the nature of the show. Like, I get it. That's what happens.
I mean, Dave feels like the common denominator in all of those scenarios where he's acting differently on camera to off camera. I've heard a few other people saying that, so it's interesting to hear your perspective.
And like we were messaging last week when we're literally watching it on air around the campfire and he's standing up and he's yelling and that was a tough one to like. There's been a couple of really tough episodes to watch. That was really challenging to watch in the fact that we sat down and yeah, I'm very protective of my partner. If I'm in a relationship, I'm very protective. And we sat down and straight away Dave approached me about Lauren's behavior. And naturally in that environment, if I'm in a public setting with 20 people that may or may not be your friends and my partner gets approached and attacked, I'm always going to defend her. And I think that's a good quality in a relationship. And we did talk off camera. Lauren and I had a bunch of conversations about the things she said. And I don't support a lot of the behaviors and the things she said. I think she was very out of line with the way she spoke to a lot of people. And I don't support that. And we had a lot of tough conversations around that. And that was a factor with why I didn't want to stay there either. There were definitely a number of things she said that weren't okay. And we had conversations about that. And even sitting there when we're at that setting and Dave and Jamie started standing up and Jamie started pointing and they were both swearing at us, which you don't see on the actual airing. And I got to the point where I said to both of them, sit the down. And obviously that airing gets directed at me saying it at Jamie. And it's not okay to say that. I get it. I literally apologised twice to her then. I also went inside on camera and apologised to her again, and she didn't really want to have anything to do with it, which is fine. If she wasn't ready to accept it, that's okay. And then I apologised back to her in Sydney when we got back there. And then after our commitment ceremony last night, the next morning, I said to Lauren, we've got to go down and we both have to apologise to Jamie and Dave. Let's go and do it. And Lauren wasn't really up for it, but in the end, we did go. She's like, okay, let's do this. So we went down and I said, look, we've got to do this. Like, you have to apologise. I'm going to apologise as well. And they were great. Jamie and Dave were like, yeah, it's no problem. Like, we get it. We appreciate the apology. So it's hard to watch back and see that there's no apologies coming from myself or Lauren towards any of the group. But then we also see last night Jamie get time for her to say an apology to the group, which now puts her character back into a positive light. So it's a tough watch when some people get the space to apologise and it goes to air, but then the amount of times I apologise to Jamie because, yeah, I wasn't proud of that. I don't want to conduct myself in that way. Ideally, I wanted to remove myself from the group in that environment, but then you get called spineless and a coward and everything else that you're not standing up. So it's like you try and have a conversation, you try and talk to people. And for me, disappointingly for me, I'd result into saying like, just shut the up. Like, I just cannot hear this anymore.
So before we dive into the commitment ceremony, on the retreat,
Mm-hmm.
outside of the drama with Jamie, Lauren was making a few comments about the other brides, one that stands
Mm-hmm.
calling Beth an ugly mute, and you were shown, I guess, laughing along. Were there moments that you called her out on this behavior that we just weren't seeing, or were you kind of agreeing with her just to keep the peace? What was happening there?
There were so many times where I would just be like, Lauren, you cannot say that. Like, you cannot call someone that. You cannot keep calling people bogans. The amount of times, but it's frustrating to see that none of that gets seen. And there were moments that were even captured on camera. And I was like, this hopefully gets shown and gets put into context. And there were so many moments where we'd be by ourselves and I'd have a conversation. And I remember at couples retreat, the next day, I was like, after the girls' night, I was like, Lauren, you do need to go and apologise. Like, even if no one else apologises to you, go and apologise for what you've said. And she's like, nah, not going to. And I was like, well, I'm not sure if she ended up doing that. She may have done that and I didn't know. But I was definitely suggesting strongly to her that she needs to apologise and give a little bit up here. Go and swallow your pride and go and actually apologise for what you've said. And then it's up to the other person to apologise. Because I know I've said all my apologies I need to, and I'll keep saying them. If any of the cast contact me and are unhappy with what I've said, happy to have a discussion.
Yep.
And the thing is, when you're one-on-one with someone out of the cast, you can have a discussion and talk to them for the most part. But when they're in a group setting, everyone just wants to talk louder, and those conversations don't happen, and I just give up on it.
And if we get into Sunday night's commitment ceremony, you and Lauren
Mm-hmm.
obviously left the experiment. Had you both agreed ahead of time to write leave? You had come to that conclusion together?
Yeah, we'd both agreed to write leave at the couples retreat, or even, basically when we're wanting to leave the first day of the couples retreat, we both had a conversation and we were both out of there. I think we'd even agreed before that to go the next commitment ceremony. We're both out of here. Like, we're not feeling this. We were both on the same page there for sure.
Had you also agreed to walk out of the commitment ceremony together, or what happened there?
That was my decision to walk out of the commitment ceremony at the end. I could see Lauren, if we stayed there, I could see Lauren probably engaging in more bad behavior and comments. And I thought the best thing to do in that time was to actually just get her out of the room for her own sake. I think she would have just got swallowed up in the rest of the group, and a lot more comments would probably come out of her mouth. And I was like, you know what, let's exit right now. Call it week, whatever it is. But I was at the time, I was like, no, this is not an environment where she needs to just keep damaging herself and other people.
Were there any major moments from the episode that we didn't see on TV?
The biggest moment, I think, from watching the commitment ceremony, which we didn't see, is how vocal and how loud the group got towards Lauren when we're sitting on the couch. There was definitely yelling and even swearing in our direction, and especially towards Lauren. And you don't see that. It actually looks a lot tamer than what actually it was. And I was amazed that the so-called experts were actually sitting there letting it all happen and unfold. And that's where I just got to the point where I was just like, shut the up. Like, this doesn't stop. And this is a part of the reason why we wanted to leave and not be here. And that wasn't directed at Jamie at all. It was directed more at Adrian. I know on the airing it showed it like I was saying it to Jamie, which wasn't the case. Otherwise, they would have pulled me up on the spot. So that was probably the main takeaway. There was also me apologising to the group and Jamie as well. Again, last night.
No.
Doesn't get shown. But I guess the hard bit was Alessandra going quite hard at me, trying to get me to say that I was into Lauren, which wasn't the case at all. And then I think John even might have mentioned that it's like, hey, Clint, it's okay. You can admit if you're into Lauren and she's not. I'm like, but I'm not. Like, can you just? I'm actually not into her. So can you just take it for what it is? So I walked away from that confused, going, what narrative are they really running here? What am I going to look like? Because this was all really weird, and it didn't make sense because it was pretty straightforward. We both want to leave. We're both not into each other. Yeah, we will aim to catch up outside of this. Lauren wanted to come to Tassie and hang out, and that's it. Nothing more to add. And that was that. That just didn't. The message did not get across.
So you and Lauren left the room. What happened next?
We left the room. Production stopped us and said, "You guys have to go in." And I was like, "We do not have to do anything." So And then they're like, well, you're going to get redemption. I think it's wise that you go in. And then Lauren's like, oh, maybe we should. And I was like, no, Lauren, we're not going back in now with our tail between our legs. We're out of here. You don't need to be in amongst that environment because the things that you're probably going to say aren't going to help your character. So let's keep going. Let's go. We've had enough. And this whole group environment is not a healthy environment for us.
What was your relationship like after leaving the show? Did she ever come and visit Tassie?
We left. She went back to Brisbane. I came back to Tassie, and I had time to remove myself, obviously from the experiment, and spend a bit of time at home and just started to think about what had gone on over the last few weeks, what had actually happened in the relationship, what I felt towards Lauren in the fact that going back right before couples retreat and meeting her and putting all that together, and I realised that Lauren wasn't someone I wanted to be with. There were a lot of things about what I'd experienced in my time with her that I was like, no, this is not a partner that I want to spend my life with. And she might have felt the same. We talked quite a bit. We still communicate now completely. There's nothing there at all. Like when I say we communicate now, it's a check-in to make sure she's okay and vice versa. Still don't support the behaviour that she displayed. And that was a big reason why I didn't want her to come down here and spend time. There's a lot going on when you're in the experiment. There's a lot of different factors that you're trying to navigate through and work out where you actually sit with how you feel towards someone. And then we were literally friends in the last week and a half, and then got home and I was like, no, I actually don't think I need to catch up with her. I actually don't think it's what I want to do.
There have been a lot of rumors about the reunion. Do you
Mm-hmm.
and Lauren both go to the reunion?
So I go to reunion, Lauren doesn't.
Okay.
So she was meant to go, then she decided not to.
So the last time you saw Lauren was that the commitment ceremony episode.
Yeah, correct.
Looking back at the MAFS experience, what would you change if you could do it all again?
So if I look back through the entire experiment, one, I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't actually put myself in that environment. After seeing what they can do with your character and make you look, I don't think I would put myself in that position again. What I do appreciate, and I can hang my, I can hold my head high in the fact that I did stand by my partner. Maybe I should have left earlier. You know what? One thing I didn't want to do throughout the experiment is throw my partner under the bus, no matter who that. And that was one thing I value in everyday life, in a relationship outside of the experiment. That's one thing I wasn't going to do in there, no matter who I was matched with. And I didn't do that. There were times for private conversations, which we did do that, but I was never going to throw my partner under the bus in a public or a social environment. The tough bit is you can do anything you want, but they can edit you with what they want. So, yeah, it's a tough one. I just don't know how I would do it different. I really don't.
Would you ever do reality TV again?
Yeah, I'd definitely do reality TV again. I'd be pretty selective with what it was. I'll be pretty careful with where I put myself out there again.
Well, one thing I really wanted to talk to you about was the Frankenbiting in the recent
Mm-hmm.
episode. I know Dean Wells made
Yep.
a video to point out that they had used
Yep.
a snippet of your voice from the wedding episode into the context of the couples retreat. How did you feel watching that?
So I watched back the dinner party after couples retreat in the room, and when the voice overcame onto me sitting there with Lauren saying, yeah, I definitely think there's a spark there for me. I was like, well, wait a minute. I don't remember saying that. One, I don't remember feeling that, and I don't remember saying it. And then had a look back through some footage, and I could see, and then I saw, and it came to me. I was like, I can see on the wedding day, that's where I said that. And then at that time, I saw Dean put something out with pointing out that the grab had come from the wedding day. It's so disappointing to see that. Like you hear it, they can hear that they do Frankenbiting. I've heard it before, but to actually experience it and have it happen to yourself is a tough watch, because you can see these words get spoken literally 3 weeks prior. They pull it out and put it in when you're sitting at the dinner table with my mouth wasn't actually moving. But people feed into the narrative because they see that audio come through. So they think, oh, Clint's sitting there with a spark. He's such a fool because Lauren doesn't have a spark. It's like, no, we both didn't have a spark. This audio is actually from a wedding day.
What advice would you offer next year's participant?
I would offer anyone next year to, so if they've got a career or they're concerned about their character, probably don't go on the show. I think it can be quite damaging and hard to navigate through. I think if someone's mental health is not okay, wouldn't go on the show. I just think production have gone too far. I've seen each year, I've watched the last few seasons, and it gets more dramatic and more dramatic. And you see a lot of the cast starting to speak out, and a lot of the cast this year have spoken out about a lot of the things that are out of context. And I think it's just gone way too far.
No, I appreciate you just opening up about your experience and kind of shining a light on what
Mm,
viewers don't realize, because I think that helps in the momentum of
mm.
reshape reality TV. So, oh yeah, I appreciate you taking the time out.
It's awful to watch and awful to see. Even fellow cast members, like I'll speak on about Jackie, for example, watching what's happened to Jackie in the first few weeks of her being on air. Like, she's a smart girl. She's a really smart, career-driven girl. And to have her on there, they're making her look like she's all over the place and fake crying and all this sort of stuff, where that's not her. How can you damage someone's character like that? She's a great person. She's a attractive, smart girl that's actually got some insecurities in a lot of way, and they've made her sound like a person that loves herself, that no one's on her level. All these things that get thrown in there, which are again Franken bites or Franken edits. Then people like Jackie have got to take the time to go recover her character. Like, why should she have to do that? She's come into this show. She's worked hard to be the person she is. She's developed herself. She's got a great career. And within a few weeks, they strip that away from her.
Wild, the power of editing and the power of removing context.
Mm,
Great.
yeah.
We'll have to chat again soon to
Mm,
continue talking about Jackie and
yeah.
everything that's happened recently. But appreciate you just taking the time out to chat. Was there anything else you wanted to unpack?
I think the main takeaway from me is that, yeah, there was a lot of behaviour that Lauren demonstrated that I didn't support, and they didn't show that I didn't support it, and they didn't show a lot of the tough conversations that we had. I know you hear it going into a reality TV show that, oh, you sign your life away, they can do what you want. You're going in, and I know myself, I went in as I would regard myself as a pretty decent human and with good values, that's not outspoken, and it can be damaging to your character with how they can actually make you look.